The boarding gate was a blur of noise. Rolling suitcases, restless sighs, the monotone voice of an intercom announcing delays. But in one corner, a moment of carelessness was unfolding into something irreversible. A young girl sat hunched on her suitcase, pale and trembling, clutching a stuffed bunny like a lifeline. A flight attendant loomed above her, voice sharp with irritation. The child's boarding pass fluttered to the ground, torn in half. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Her father, returning from a phone call, froze mid-step. He saw the fear in her eyes, and something in him shifted. Without saying a word, he turned and walked toward the cockpit. That morning had begun like any other for Captain Ryan Matthews. Red-eye flights, stale coffee, and the numb fatigue of routine. But this flight home was supposed to be different. His daughter Emma had flown out to visit him between rotations, a promise he'd made to balance the distance that came with being a pilot and a single father. She was 10, bright-eyed, endlessly curious, the kind of child who waved at planes and dreamed of touching the clouds. Yet this morning, she wasn't herself. Her face was flushed, her breathing shallow. "Just tired," she whispered, forcing a smile. Ryan had hesitated but decided to bring her home. Denver wasn't far, and she insisted she could manage. At Gate 47, tension simmered. The storm that had delayed flights left passengers irritable and the staff overwhelmed. The flight attendant, Julia, had been on her feet for 11 hours, juggling complaints and system errors. So when Emma stepped up, searching nervously through her small backpack for her ID, coughing lightly, Julia's patience frayed. "You need to step aside," Julia snapped. She didn't mean to sound cruel. It was just exhaustion, fear of contagion, and the pressure of procedure mixing into something brittle. By the time Ryan returned from his call, Emma's boarding pass lay in pieces. Her voice shook as she tried to explain. Julia's face was already red, half from anger, half from realizing what she'd done. Passengers stared. No one spoke. Ryan didn't shout. Years of cockpit discipline had taught him restraint, but the look in his eyes, steady, controlled, carried more weight than any outburst could. He wrapped his arm around Emma and whispered, "It's all right." Then he walked away, leaving silence in his wake. Ryan made his way through the corridor to the operations office, every step echoing with calm precision. The supervisor on duty, Mark, recognized him instantly. "Captain Matthews? You're off rotation today, aren't you?" "I was," Ryan said quietly. "But there's been a problem at Gate 47. He explained what had happened, his tone even but deliberate. He didn't embellish or accuse. He simply described Emma's illness, the misunderstanding, the torn pass, and the way she'd been left humiliated in front of strangers. As he spoke, his voice trembled not from anger, but from something deeper. The ache of witnessing his child experience the kind of callousness he'd always tried to shield her from. Mark's expression hardened. "She did what?" Ryan shook his head. "She's not a bad person. She's just tired. But if we don't stop to address moments like this, we become part of the problem." Within minutes, calls were made. The duty manager arrived, along with a small group from crew relations. Passengers at the gate began whispering as staff gathered around Julia, who stood frozen by the check-in counter, hands clasped together. The murmur of the airport seemed to fade as Ryan returned with the manager beside him. When the announcement came, "This flight will be delayed pending an internal review," disbelief spread through the crowd. People pulled out phones, recording snippets. But what they captured wasn't outrage. It was accountability. Emma, still pale, watched as her father knelt beside her. "You okay, kiddo?" he asked softly. She nodded, leaning into him. "Did I do something wrong?" He smiled faintly. "No, sweetheart. You did everything right." Across from them, Julia's composure cracked. Her hands trembled. She wanted to explain that she'd only meant to follow protocol, that she hadn't realized the child was his daughter, that fatigue had blurred her empathy. But excuses dissolved on her tongue. Ryan didn't need to scold her. The stillness he brought to the gate said everything. In that quiet, something more powerful than punishment was taking shape. Understanding. The internal communication system buzzed alive. Flight 284 would remain grounded. The pilot assigned had refused to depart until an ethics review was completed. That pilot was Ryan himself. He stood in the cockpit, sunlight spilling over the control panel. His badge rested on the dashboard beside the throttle. "No aircraft I'm responsible for takes off," he said, "until every passenger is treated with basic human decency." His co-pilot said nothing, just nodded, knowing this wasn't about authority, but principle. Down at the gate, Julia watched as the crew gathered. Her stomach twisted. For the first time, she realized how easily indifference can masquerade as professionalism. She saw Emma clutching her father's jacket, and shame filled the spaces where excuses used to live. Passengers, once frustrated about the delay, began to soften. A mother knelt beside her son, explaining quietly, "Sometimes adults have to stop everything to fix something important." Then, through the intercom, the gate agent's voice wavered. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. We're currently addressing a passenger care situation. Your understanding means the world." No one complained. The terminal, usually a place of hurry and distraction, became a silent theater of reflection. When Ryan stepped out of the cockpit, Julia met his gaze. Her eyes glistened. He didn't speak. Instead, he extended his hand. The gesture wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but a bridge. She hesitated, then took it, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry," Ryan nodded. "Then let's make sure this never happens again." It wasn't a threat. It was a vow. 2 hours later, the engines roared to life. Emma sat beside her father, wrapped in a blanket the crew had found. The sky outside glowed with the first hint of sunset, gold bleeding into violet. She leaned her head on his shoulder, whispering, "You stopped the plane." He smiled. Sometimes the right thing means stopping everything. Back at the terminal, Julia sat alone, filling out her report. She replayed every moment. Her tone, her words, the look on the child's face. Guilt, heavy and sharp, gave way to something quieter, reflection. That night, she wrote an email to the crew relations office requesting empathy training modules for future hires. Weeks passed. Ryan never mentioned the incident again. But within the airline, whispers of it grew into policy changes. Supervisors began emphasizing compassion as much as safety. Employees spoke of the captain who grounded a plane not out of anger but to protect dignity. Months later, Julia sent a letter to Ryan. "You grounded more than a flight that day," she wrote. "You grounded my arrogance and taught me that every passenger carries a story we can't see." He never replied. He simply placed the letter in his logbook, a quiet reminder that integrity doesn't need applause. Emma recovered fully, though she often told her friends, "My dad once stopped an entire airport for me." And every time he heard her say it, Ryan smiled, not from pride, but from gratitude that the moment which began in cruelty ended in compassion. Because sometimes, the greatest flights aren't the ones that take off, but the ones that teach us how to land. In a world obsessed with moving faster, one man chose to stop, and in doing so reminded everyone watching that empathy isn't weakness. It's the runway where humanity takes flight.